Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Executive. My name is Councillor Paul Fires, and I'm leader of the Council and chair of this first Executive meeting of 2024. We're enjoying the slightly more intimate surroundings of Committee Room 1 today due to a technical failure in the chamber, and of course this is being webcast as normal. Ben, apologies for absence.
Thank you. We have apologies from Councillor Mirrlees.
Thank you very much. Item 2, the minutes of the previous meeting on the 28th of November. Can I have all those available to show? Thank you. Declarations, any declarations of interest, anybody? No. Questions from members of the public, Ben?
There are none.
And questions from members?
There are none.
Thank you very much. Okay, so on to updates from everybody. So first of all, can I just welcome Councillor Murray, who's joined the Executive today with us for the first time, and of course Councillor Fairclough, who from today is also Deputy Leader of the Council and therefore Vice Chairman of the Executive. So welcome. A few updates this week. Firstly, Happy New Year, everyone. I think that's probably about the last January 9th is probably about the latest I can legitimately say that before it gets slightly silly. But Happy New Year, everyone. I hope everybody had a good and restful New Year's, because of course naturally it had already started at a fairly brisk pace since getting back after Christmas. Some couple of updates from me first. Councillor Townsend will talk a little bit about this as well, but I've been talking with a lot of residents about Thames Water compensation. Seem to be two types of individual residents on this. Some residents who've not received any compensation whatsoever from Thames Water after the last outage, as well as a number of residents who've received very much not what they were expecting in terms of compensation. This is due to the fact that Thames Water class somebody as having water if they had any water whatsoever on that day, whether or not it was actually useful in any serious way or not. I've been talking to Thames Water over Christmas, as I know have a number of others, to try and resolve those on an individual basis. And I've got further discussions with them next week. Councillor Townsend and I are also just drafting the terms of reference for the water working group, and she's going to go into that in a bit more detail in a moment. Finally, from me, before I pass over to Tony, today was the day that we calculated, not we, but has been calculated that 2023 was the hottest year on record for this planet. And it's today of all days, I would give notice to everybody that the Court of Appeal has formally given approval for Loxley Well, better known as the fossil fuel drilling and extraction near Dunsfold, obviously in Waverley. This is, of course, fully in line with the government's fairly ludicrous pretense at a net zero strategy, and seems to include a host of fossil fuel licences exactly like this. And I have no doubt Councillor Williams will take us through some of that in a moment. I'm also just going to give a couple of updates from Councillor Mirrlees, as she can't be with us today, particularly because the Edge is now open from the 13th of this month, and the first couple will be back in there at the same time. And invitations have now gone out for the meeting on the 8th of February for the restoration company for the Farnham Museum project. And stakeholders and local individuals impacted by the works will have the opportunity to see that programme of works, hear what the work will entail, and our plans to involve the community going forward. And there'll be opportunity to ask questions at the end of that presentation to the company doing that work. I think we're all very, very keen for that work to get started, and I think it's a really good, successful outcome of the very hard work our officers and staff have put in to get that going. At that point, I shall hand over to Councillor Fairclough for any updates that you've got.
Thank you, Paul. I can start the new year with a small bit of good news for those of you following Brightwells, which is that the Real Cinema is scheduled to open on the 2nd of February, which is the first commercial unit which will be opened. And hopefully there will be many more to follow. So good luck to Real.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Keele.
Thank you, Leader. I would also like to welcome Councillor Murray to the Executive. Look forward to working with you, and congratulations to Councillor Fairclough on becoming Deputy Leader. I just wanted to give a brief update on the Constitution Working Group. Last night, the Standards and General Purposes Committee considered new sections of the Constitution regarding terms of reference of the Joint Governance Committee, key decision threshold, monitoring officer protocol, officer employment procedure rules, and one new council procedure rule. These were supported with minor amendments, and they will be considered by full council at an extraordinary meeting on the 24th of January. I would also like to welcome the engagement from ONS, who meet next week to consider the programme recently agreed by the Executive for the collaboration with Guildford. Finally, I would like to thank the HR team at Waverley for supporting the Chief Executive recruitment process during November and December. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you, Leader, and welcome Councillor Murray, and congratulations Councillor Fairclough. again. We published our draft budgets for the coming year, 2024-25, and these will be reviewed in the run-up to our budget setting council in February, and starting with a councillor briefing later this evening. Like everyone else, we're being permanently scarred by the impacts of cost inflation and the wholly inadequate support, financial or otherwise, that we need to keep up with it. While I'm relieved to report that with a below inflation 2.99% increase in council tax, we're proposing a balanced budget with no cuts to services, but the outlook beyond 2024-25 remains challenging. Even though inflation is decelerating, it will stay above sustainable levels for some time and inflict further damage still. Meanwhile, the government's told us to still plan for the withdrawal of what's left of the direct funding it either provides to us or controls, including what's left of our share of business rates. As usual, the government on it not only left it until the very last minute, 12 working days ago, just before the Christmas break, to announce its plans for us for 2024-25, it's once again failed to give us the visibility we need to plan for the years beyond that. So we shall continue to implement and improve our budget strategy while we wait for a government that's slightly less ludicrous. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. And Councillor Murray is away. Councillor Murray.
Nothing to report other than thank you for your welcoming to the executive. My portfolio is customer services and IT. I met with Nicola Himes today, and we had a nice chat. And she told me what her things were, and I'm looking forward to supporting the team and working with them and with the rest of you. Thank you very much.
Customer services and IT, traditionally very quiet roles at the back.
I do get that impression, yeah.
Absolutely.
When do you want to
Yeah.
be? Oh, 3 months?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, Paul.
Councillor Palmer.
Nothing to report on, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Rivers.
Just a little puff on the fact that we had a briefing on the regulator of social housing new powers, which will come into effect on April Fool's Day this year. I don't know why they chose such a date, but we had or I attended a question and answer session this afternoon with a couple of that team and about 50 or 60 other either housing associations or people like us. Some interesting questions. Everybody had their fingers crossed to see that we can actually deal with this stuff from the 1st of April. Beyond that,
And I know our team
it's all good so far.
Indeed, they are. Yeah. And then not quite finally, Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Leader. People will be aware of the recent rainfall across the country and all of the flooding that we've seen. And this isn't just flooding, but this will also involve the complete overload of our sewage infrastructure. And unfortunately, this has been happening here in Waverley as well last week. I know that Thames Water refers to these as hydraulic events or hydraulic overloads, which sounds quite benign, but it certainly is not. Because actually when this happens and there is a excessive surface water entering the sewage network, it means that raw sewage is then discharged at multiple points. They're called combined sewage overflows, and they're literally pipes that come out of the sewage works and are just, the raw sewage is released direct into our river network. And then there are also the storm tanks at the sewage treatment works, whereby the water coming into the sewage coming into the treatment works then bypasses any treatment and again is dumped directly into the rivers. And when you think of all the sewage treatment works, whether it's Cranley Waters or along the River Wey, we have got multiple events, environmental events happening across the borough. And that does lead to environmental deterioration, and it also presents a human health hazard as well. And this is just the sewage that we know is happening. We can look at these sewage maps and we can see where dumping is occurring. However, I have residents now in Cranby who are distraught when heavy rainfall happens, because it's not just going into the rivers, it's coming up through manholes, it's entering their properties, it's going into their gardens, it's entering the streets. And, you know, these are things that perhaps I am not confident that Thames Water is recording these events. And we have tried to do what we can from a point of view of the Borough Council. And, you know, we have recently had the State of the Borough meeting, and we have written to Thames Water. As far as I'm aware, we have received no response to that. But we still want to do more. We want to do whatever we can to help our residents and to try and highlight this issue. Because against this backdrop, obviously, we have increasing housing numbers that we're expected to deliver, but we need to have far more clarity from the government on the supporting infrastructure that we desperately need, and especially on our water supply and also on our sewerage infrastructure. So we will be setting up a working group, and we'll be inviting residents and other stakeholders, whether that's the Environment Agency, the Wildlife Trust, other environmental bodies, to feed into that, so that we can provide an evidence base, not only direct from our residents, but also from our other stakeholders. And we want to have that evidence base for the local plan, but also to lobby government much, much harder to see whether they are able or whether they are willing to do anything to try and force investment into our infrastructure. Because we cannot have more capacity being used up in our sewage treatment works and in our sewerage infrastructure by additional development without recognising the extreme pressure that is putting on existing residents. And as I said, this time, you know, we had sewage coming up into residents' homes, but we also have businesses as well that are affected by this. Businesses that can't flush their toilets, that can't have people in the office because they've got no way of using any water. And also this time as well, we had a sewage dump as well on a local in Alfold on their sports fields as well. So sewage seeping out onto that. This cannot be pushed under the carpet. Thames Water can say sorry, can apologise, but actually, apologies are no good. We've had this for years now. It's been a problem that just has been increasing and increasing. Thames Water knew about climate change. They knew about extreme weather events, and they have done nothing to make sure that their systems are robust enough. So we will be pushing it further as far as we can.
And actually, just to add to that, the sessions that we attended at the University of Surrey made it very clear that the root cause of the most recent outages are things that will definitely recur, in that they freely admit that they are unable to provide additional resilience to the system in order to prevent that kind of issue happening again. So it is not a case of if, it is a case of when. And that is why, as one of the actions that we took from the State of the Borough meeting, we'll be looking at additional resilience for Waverley Borough Council to respond to those sorts of issues in cooperation with our towns and parishes. Because this will occur again, for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And finally, Councillor Williams.
Yeah, so today we're hearing about flooding, we're hearing about extreme weather conditions, we're hearing about record temperatures. And as our leader pointed out, the news today that 2023 was the hottest year on record, and that 2024 might be hotter still. And then today we heard the news that the Court of Appeal has overturned our attempt, along with Protect Dunsfold and the Good Law Project, to stop UK oil and gas, or UKOG, from drilling for fossil fuels in our borough. Now, had we been successful in our appeal, we would now have been preparing to challenge the Secretary of State of this bankrupt government in the Supreme Court. And we are firmly of the view that our response to the climate crisis must involve no new coal mines, no new oil wells, no new fossil fuel drilling, no fracking. And apparently that is not the view of the present government. During our long-running legal battle to challenge the drilling for fossil fuels in an area of great landscape value in Dunsfold, UKOG wrote to me accusing me of corporate defamation for saying that this was bad news for the planet and bad news for the people of Waverley. But despite this, I'm delighted today to quote the words
of Mr. Stephen Sanderson, the Chief Executive of UCOG. And I quote, "We believe that a successful project will be beneficial to local and national level energy and economic interests and is fully in keeping with the government's hydrogen energy security and net zero strategies." Now, Mr. Sanderson, I believe, is wrong in that the project is beneficial to local and national energy and economic interests, but he is certainly correct in saying that the policy is, quote, fully in keeping with the government's net zero strategy. Sadly, it is this government's policy that has encouraged exactly this kind of desecration of our landscape with such scant regard for the future of our planet. The government of Rishi Sunak, and yes, Jeremy Hunt. Jeremy Hunt, who stood alongside Paul Follows and myself back in January 2022, challenging the proposed drilling for hydrocarbons in Dunsfold. Jeremy Hunt, who is now part of the government that has stated in all seriousness that the route to net zero is defined by even more drilling for fossil fuels. We shall be writing to Jeremy Hunt, both as our MP and as a senior member of the government, asking for an explanation on behalf of the residents of Waverley, and we will continue to reaffirm our declaration of a climate emergency, which involves opposition to all onshore drilling for fossil fuels. We will continue to use all legal means to prevent UCOG from commencing work on exploitation of hydrocarbons on the Dunsfold site. We will continue to put the maximum pressure on UCOG to comply with the 32 planning conditions, several of which relate to traffic and road management. And we will use every legal means to prevent UCOG vehicles encroaching onto the common land at Pratt's Corner near the site. So we have suffered a great setback today in an important battle that we have taken up, but we will continue the battle.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I will just add to that as well that regardless of your opinions on the government's strategy on this, as there is absolutely no prohibition on the export of the fossil fuels, the idea that they will exclusively benefit our own national security for energy security is entirely baseless. Every single time we have called for that to be supported in planning conditions and in law to prevent the export of the gas if it is indeed used for the benefit of the United Kingdom, or indeed for the benefit of Waverley, as was actually outlined in some of the original responses from UCOG. As neither of those things have occurred, and indeed such planning conditions were ruled out of order when they were proposed by Councillor Penny Rivers when this came first up at Surrey County Council, I see no reason to support the notion that this is in any way supporting of a UK national security policy on energy. At that point, we'll go now to our local business, starting with item 7, recommendations for overview and scrutiny. So the overview and scrutiny committees will actually be meeting later this month, so they will be considered any recommendations at the February meeting of the exec. And so I'll now move on to item 8, the housing latent defect remediation in Farnham, which is with Councillor Palmer to introduce.
Or me, if you prefer.
My apologies, Councillor Rivers.
Well, how easy to confuse.
That's right. It's
Second
when you get that sudden excitement and you turn rapidly. Yeah, well, luckily I can help you out.
Again.
And luckily too, we have Louisa to put us straight on all this. This is a sad tale of new builds in Farnham that didn't go to plan. And because we have some good accountants here, we've got a little thing called, latent defect budget on which we can draw down and repair. One of these 4 has already been done, I believe, and 3 need to be done. And the exec is requested to approve the allocation of £114,225 from the latent defects budget. And should that happen, these rather nice 3 or 4 houses will be complete and will be perfect for our tenants to move in. They look very nice. I can't say anything more other than just read through section 7 on background and it'll say just how much of a sad tale this is.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Councillor Rivers. Certainly, it is something that we need to do to make sure these homes are fit and in compliance with our housing strategy. It is also something that we budget for in the event of this sort of thing happening. Louisa, did you want to add anything at all?
Just to say they are tenanted. This is latent defect work, so the properties are completed and occupied. It's just to remediate some issues with the floorboards.
Okay. Any further comments in one, George?
Sorry, did the tenants move out? Well, because they're taking the whole floor, first floor floorboard, the ceiling and the floor off, I imagine, and refitting it. So they move out, and did they get rehoused during this period?
Having completed the first property of the 4, that wasn't required.
Okay.
So at the moment, there's no expectation they will have to, but until we lift the carpets and do that investigation, you won't know, but the plan is not to. They'll just be able to reinstate at the end of the day and then start again the next day.
Yeah, in most cases, I mean, we usually keep a provision for decamping tenants if we absolutely need to, but we really try not to do it unless it's absolutely necessary. It's going to be a long time, or there's a health or other hazard that's going to be part of that issue.
And it's not appropriate for us to keep a lot of empty houses available for decants.
No,
when we could more sensibly rent them out to 1,000 or so people on the waiting list.
Yeah, exactly. We're never been at the point, and probably will not be at the point, where we have housing to spare versus the population that we've got that could have them. Any further comments on this item? Otherwise, I'll move to the recommendations. In which case, the recommendations as listed in the papers in part 2, recommendations 1 through 4. Can I have all those in favour, please show? Thank you very much. That's unanimous. And then we'll move now on to item 9, which is with Councillor Palmer, and is the housing delivery in Shirt.
Thank you, Leader. This is a step along the road of replacing a disused community centre by 4 affordable homes. There is planning permission that we need to proceed with demolition of the community centre in order not to lose the planning permissions. When that's been done, there will be further steps to build the new properties, and it's in line with our general policy of maximising the availability of affordable housing, given that the centre has not been in use for quite some time.
Yes, it's been vacant since I think 19, hasn't it? And I think the intention is to develop this alongside the adjacent road. Is it Crossways or something like that? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Any other comments? Anyone? Councillor Murray, Councillor Munro. I know you're not ready to speak, but as you're here, very happy to hear from you.
Oh, thank you very much. I didn't realise I needed to get permission.
You have to register, but entirely fine. You're here, so I always welcome contributions. So please.
Thanks very much. I'm one of the local ward members, as you gathered, I'm sure. And I just wanted to say I wholeheartedly support this. It's been going on, frankly, too long. But that's history, and we need to get on with it. The existing community centre is hardly ever used, in fact, never used, so it won't be any loss at all. And I hope we can get some decent properties there. I'm particularly pleased that there's going to be decent car parking space, frankly. I'm afraid there's been a history in the last decades that car parking has been inadequate. We know anybody moving in will have cars, and so I'm very, very pleased that there has been some concern by local residents that this development and the adjoining development at Crossways will lead to sort of fly parking on adjacent roads. So it looks as though we can reassure them. And I would hope also, of course, that the adjacent development, which is a larger one, and will lead to a fair amount of disruption, but that's life, will be carried out as soon as possible. I know there's a planning application on the pipeline, it tells me, can we please get on with it? But I would just like to say, make quite sure we have a proper amount of parking on that site to stop cars parking in the centre of the village, which is already far too crowded and very dangerous from the A207.
And as public transport to church is practically non-existent, the idea of not having, from my point of view, the idea of not having parking spaces appropriate for the number of dwellings that we're building would be slightly insane, particularly for somewhere like Church. There are a number of areas in where if you don't build the parking spaces, you will cause exactly the issue that you've just described in terms of parking at random in areas that is clearly undesirable. Anything you wanted to add, Louisa, on this one? Should be nice and straightforward, I think, for everyone.
I'll just add that, just to confirm, what's envisaged is that the 2-bedroom houses will have 2 parking spaces each, and there will in addition be 4 extra bays for visitors.
Thank you very much, in which case I'll move to the recommendations, and can I have all those in favour please show? Thank you very much, everybody. As there is no other business that needs to move to exempt, I can close the meeting at 18:25, and we'll see many of you for the budget briefing